Of Blood and Steel, written by Seymour Zainali, narrated by James Lawrence. Chapter 15. The Journey's End. The only sound Balak had heard for some time now was dripping, followed by the scurrying of rats running by as they hunted for crumbs. He'd lost track of time and couldn't tell how many days and hours had passed. He didn't know how long he was going to be in the cell, but he was used to solitude. The dark and dank cell reminded him of his home in the hollow. Balak didn't even know for certain if Arda and the child were still alive, but he knew they likely were. If they weren't, he would already be dead, as the soldiers would have no reason to keep him alive. He had allowed the soldiers to place him in the cell without a fight. He surrendered his axe. This was a time of war, so he understood that the castle guard and its king had to be cautious. The job was completed. Arda and the child were brought here safely, and now it was time for her to do her part. He wasn't about to leave this place without his coin. They fed him, but nobody had interrogated him, and he was enjoying the quiet. He asked no questions and stayed silent. This was no worse than the hollow, except he was offered no ale. There was a clink of chains and keys. Then his cell door creaked open.
"Balak, are you all right? Sorry it's taken so long. I was being questioned."
"Sure, you know me."
He looked up at Arda. She chuckled.
"King Anzor rewarded and thanked me for saving his niece, and he reassures us that we are safe behind the gates. He's had some quarters arranged for you."
"The cell was kind of growing on me."
"Come on," Arda said excitedly. "I'll show you."
Balak climbed out of the dungeon. A guard was waiting by the door with his axe, and Balak accepted its return. As they headed into the open, Balak inhaled the fresh air. The sun warmed his face, and he looked around. Inside, the castle walls bore little resemblance to the outside. Flowers in pinks and purples hung from the windows, and their sweet smell lightly scented the air. Arda led Balak across a small white courtyard and into the side entrance of a large tower. On their way up, they passed several long halls decorated by murals depicting various historical events, even if they were exaggerated. The windows were decorated in a stunning stained glass, depicting the maker as a butcher cutting his own flesh to give life. Every floor was covered with Amida's finest carpets. Those carpets had handcrafted ornaments that excited the viewers. The walls were decorated with paintings of what Balak could only assume were the extensive and distant family of the king. The vivid colors jumped off the canvas. Every item and every corner of the wall was fighting for attention. One painting showed a male figure in an open field. It looked newer than the others. The man wore a luxurious fur coat, a purple cape, and a single glove on his right hand. To the left of him was a line of men with raised, fingerless hands. In the distance behind him stood the Iron Gates castle.
"That's Lord Anzor,"
Arda informed Balak after she noticed him staring at the painting.
"Hurry up,"
she insisted, pulling Balak away from it. They climbed the tight clockwise stairs higher and higher until finally Arda twisted the metal handle of a large oak door and threw it open.
"This is yours for the duration of your stay," she told him.
The room smelled fresh, like flowers and rainwater. There was a large bed in the center of the room, a fireplace, and a table with pewter utensils. By the window were two large chairs.
"Do you want me to get your fire going so you can bathe?"
Arda pointed to a large fireplace, and in the corner beside it stood a large tin bath. There were 3 large buckets filled with water, ready to be warmed.
"I can manage,"
Balak assured her. Arda smiled and shook her head. She leaned over the chair by the window and laid out some fresh clothes and a towel on the bed.
I'll leave you in peace to rest, Arda said. We have much to talk about, but it can wait until the morning. I must get back to the child.
Balak sat on the bed. He was alone. It was so soft he sunk into it. He took off his boots and stretched out his feet, wriggling his toes. Balak rubbed his knee, his hip, and his axe-swinging shoulder. They felt stiff. He rolled his shoulder in a backward motion and yawned. It ached. In fact, all of him ached. Slowly he started to undress. He examined the scars across his stomach and side. They were fully healed now, leaving a white, wrinkly line. It had been a long time since Balak had bathed properly. His legs had many scrapes that were covered only by dirt. He climbed into the tub and tipped back his head. His beard dipped into the water and lengthened. He dipped it in further, and it stretched almost down to his stomach. The water turned a gray color that darkened after he washed. His skin started to look shriveled, and he decided it was time to climb out. After his soak in the tub, Balak grabbed his dagger and trimmed the tatty hairs at the bottom of his beard. He poured himself some ale and watched out the window for a while, sipping both jugs. He could see the enemy soldiers camped outside. They all sat around the fire, plotting their next move, but all was quiet inside and out, for now. Inside the walls, the people continued to live as normal. Children played in the street, mothers washed their clothes, and men walked to and from work. As night set in, he attempted to lie on his large, soft bed, but he could not rest. He sunk into the mattress, then tossed and turned before submitting to the comfort of the hard, freezing floor. He lay on his side and pulled over his blanket. When Balak awoke, Arda was already in his chamber. She was sitting on a chair by the window with the child, who was smiling at him. Arda looked clean and wore an ashen-blue dress. Her hair was smooth and tied up, but much shorter than it used to be.
I trust you slept well?
Arda asked.
Once I got out of that ridiculous bed, I did,
he told her as he pulled himself to his feet.
What's wrong with the bed?
It's too soft. That thing almost swallowed me whole.
You must be starving. I made you some katabs.
Arda handed Balak a cloth parcel and a small dish of yogurt with green herbs.
They turned out so nice, they're almost too gorgeous to eat.
It sure looks good,
Balak agreed as he unwrapped the parcel. He looked at it for a second, pausing. His stomach growled, and he grabbed the food and shoveled it into his mouth. Balak's thoughts turned to Georgi. He and his friend had frequently enjoyed katabs together in the hollow. He had forgotten how wonderful the warm dough felt on that first bite.
All that's missing is the ale.
Arda laughed.
Well, I'm here with the coin I promised you.
She beamed as she pointed to 2 large coin bags on the table.
You saved our lives more than once. You did what I asked of you, and we are eternally grateful. We wouldn't have made it without you. Thank you.
I don't believe that to be true. You have grit, Arda. Your heart is in the right place. I think you would have made it here with or without me.
Honestly?
Honestly, even though you're a pain in the arse at times,
he said, patting her shoulder. The two laughed, and Arda placed her hand on Balak's. The child looked up at him, and he gently nudged her cheek.
And don't you be causing any more trouble.
The child smiled and flapped her arms excitedly.
Where will you go?
Arda asked him.
I'm not certain.
Don't go back to the hollow, she pleaded. You don't need to go back there, I mean.
I don't know yet,
he croaked. A somber silence fell over the two of them. The city inside the wall was a busy place, and children played right below Balak's window. Their laughter filled his room as they ran back and forth up the alley. Arda was the first to interrupt the silence.
Balak, I'm sorry I lied to you."
He stared at her. She was looking him in the eye with sincerity.
"About the magic and the purpose of my journey, for putting you in peril, everything."
"If you had told me the truth at the beginning, you know I wouldn't have agreed to help."
Arda nodded.
"We will never forget what you did for us. You are welcome to visit if you ever find yourself this way."
"That's very generous of you,"
Balak said as he bowed his head.
"Now, back to the important stuff."
Balak changed the subject.
"Where's that tavern people keep talking about?"
"Well, let me show you around first."
Arda stood and headed for the door. Just outside were two guards holding large kite-shaped shields and wearing kettle helmets. Balak grabbed some handfuls of coin and followed Arda. He placed the rest underneath a chair and draped his cloak over the chair to keep it out of sight. He followed Arda down the stairs and into the courtyard. She pointed out the taverns, the blacksmiths, and the market. The castle was spotless and not at all dreary on the inside. There was a smoky metal smell as they walked by the market. Everywhere they went, the guards followed.
"What was it exactly you said you did back in Elbrus?"
Balak asked.
"I didn't. I was a washer."
He looked behind them and noticed the two guards continuing to follow them.
"Do these guys follow you everywhere?"
"Only when I have the child. They need to ensure she's protected."
"Somehow, being followed around makes me feel less safe."
"How come?"
"Seems a little excessive. Surround yourself with guards and you can be spotted in any place."
"Maybe it is a little over the top. I'll have a word."
"So, what does the future hold for you and the child?"
he asked Arda as they walked slowly through the dusty streets.
"Well, I'm the child's caretaker while she grows up, so wherever she goes, I go."
She grinned.
"Anzor wants her to play a pinnacle role in his efforts to regain control of the lands. Together, they will take on the other members of the royal family and challenge them, as they have failed to restore peace and order since the king's death."
"And you will both be protected?"
"Of course, and she will be able to live out her destiny here."
"Is this really the life you imagined for her?"
"Through her veins run royal blood. She will be raised amongst her equals, educated and lawful people. This is her destiny. I don't have much to say in the matter."
Arda sighed.
"You say that, but you don't mean it."
Arda was silent. They headed into the market, and Balak made his way around, looking at different clothing. After he left Arda's company, he headed to the blacksmith and had them enhance his axe. The blacksmith had a dozen metal loops hanging at his station. He offered to make Balak a whole new axe, but he refused.
"Just sharpen it as best you can,"
Balak told him. The blacksmith was highly skilled, and Balak watched him work as he heated the iron, shaped it, and dipped it into water. The double-headed axe looked almost new by the time he had finished, so Balak also had a sword and a small dagger made. To hold his weaponry, he bought a luxurious carrying belt fit for a king's knight. He also bought new chainmail. Balak had everything he needed for his journey, but he was still unsure of his destination. The siege gave him time to think. He wasn't about to go anywhere until that was over. Each night he slept on the cold floor. He preferred his archaic clothes, and carrying his new weapons made him feel uneasy. Maybe he would go back to his humble life in the hollow and squander his coin. Arda was Balak's only companion for the days that followed, walking with him to the stables to feed the horses and to the tavern to taste the ale he had heard so much about. Being a skeptic, Balak savored the taste, but on his first sip he stated,
"I already feel tomorrow's headache."
Everyone cheered. The more Arda made Balak out to be a hero, the more ale he drank.
"Keep it down about the hero part."
he said before ordering more ale. The listeners chattered and sipped their drinks. Arda told Balak,
"The world needs more people like you, Balak, the kind of hero—"
"I'm not a fucking hero,"
Balak exclaimed.
"Look at me. Look at these hands that strangled men to their very last breath. Look at this scar. I got it because a man tried to stab me in my sleep. I strangled him to death and watched his eyes pop out of their sockets. I don't even remember half the wounds I have on me. I'm not a hero, Arda. I am the terror of Tartaurus."
The whole place went silent, and people were staring at Balak. Arda didn't say a word and slowly got up and left the bar.
"What the fuck are you all looking at?"
Balak asked the crowd. They promptly returned to their business. He looked at the tavern owner and told him to pour another drink.
"I think you've had enough for one night, brother,"
the man protested.
"Do as you're fucking told, and don't make me ask twice,"
Balak told the man, slamming the table with his clenched fist. The night was getting dark when Balak was left alone in the tavern, trying to drink himself to death for the first time in a long while. He stumbled back to his quarters, and a man approached him and started shaking. He grabbed Balak's shirt.
"Help me!"
he cried before collapsing on the floor. Balak yanked his leg free and walked on, but then a woman stumbled in front of him and collapsed. Blood splattered from her mouth as she writhed in pain. Balak snapped out of his drunken stupor when another 3 people in the alley dropped to the ground. He started running back to the keep and screamed Arda's name in hopes that she would hear his voice amongst the chaos.
"Balak, what's going on?"
she asked him when they finally met.
"I don't know."
They were startled suddenly as the alarm bell started ringing loudly.
"That's the warning bell,"
Arda told Balak.
"This can't be good."
People began panicking, running through the streets. Balak scanned the area. He armed himself with his trusty double-headed axe, and they both rushed on top of the city walls to get a better look.
"This doesn't look right."
"What is it?"
"Over there. What do you see?"
Balak asked Arda as he pointed at the enemy camp.
"Nothing."
"Exactly. It's not an attack."
"So what are the people running from?"
"I guess we're about to find out,"
Balak stated. They made their way outside and headed toward the castle's keep. On their way, the man in front of them dropped to his knees.
"Hey, let me help you up."
Arda offered her hand, but the man couldn't get back onto his feet. He was holding his hand toward her, but he was making choking sounds and leaning forward. He grabbed Arda's dress before falling to the ground. His breathing faded. Balak yanked her free.
"Is he—"
"Dead. We need to get to the child,"
Balak commanded. They ran toward the keep and passed several people with the same symptoms. People either had bulging eyes, were making choking sounds, or had already slumped to the ground. Arda kept stopping to help the sick people. She tried to lift them to their feet, but the people of the city were falling one by one. Balak pulled Arda away.
"Try not to touch them. We don't know what's causing it," he told her.
As they got closer to the keep, they could see guards preventing people from entering, but Arda and Balak were granted access. They approached the throne room, and Lord Anzor was inside. He tilted his head slightly to the left, listening to the whispers of his adviser, when he noticed Arda. The lord sat high up on a royal throne, with his velvet cloak ruffled open in the wind, showing smart black breeches, a white silk tunic underneath, and a single bright purple glove on his right hand. He looked older than Balak, with every hair turned white on his head, but he seemed healthy nonetheless. Lord Anzor started to speak in his native tongue, and Balak listened cautiously. He didn't understand the language fully, but he picked up the words poison and water. Arda's concerned look confirmed his suspicion.